Now broadcasting from the Next Gen Conservative Studio in sunny South Florida, bringing you the latest in politics, current events, and pop culture. This is the Whitfield Report with Sam Whitfield.
Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Monday edition of the Whitfield Report. I'm your host, Sam Whitfield, and joining us for the Monday edition of the show is a return guest, friend of the show, also one of my favorite authors, Eric P. Bishop, author of The Body Man, and also author of the new political thriller novella, Ransomed Daughter, which is available now in paperback. Is it available
all
in
over
paperback?
Amazon? Actually, it's everywhere now. The paperback is available everywhere else, like Barnes and Noble and Target and all that stuff. But mainly Amazon is where I normally push people. It's easy.
I don't have a copy of The Body Man in front of me, but I do have it on my Kindle here as well. So there I go.
Yeah, mine's over there. Mine's over that shoulder, I think. It's got pushed back behind Ransomed Daughter now. It's been relegated to the back seat.
It's the older child, but this is the
redheaded stepchild. It's the redheaded stepchild now. So no, I'm proud of it. It's the one that I worked really hard for, and 7 years after writing my first novel, I finally got something published. So I'm very proud of that moment.
Yeah. So the last time that you were on, you were working with a small publisher.
Yep.
And you told me that things have changed. So just I don't want to give away too much, but what's been going on since the last time we talked on here 2 years ago?
So about a little more than a year ago now, I guess it was a year over the summer, I submitted Breach of Trust, which was the follow-up to The Body Man. Didn't hear anything for months. I mean, I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 months. It was sometime November-ish. I heard back from the publisher, and to my surprise, they did not really like it or wanted to make a lot of changes, put it that way. It wasn't really clear if they wanted a full rewrite or whatever, which I know happens in the publishing world. And I believed in the book. I had a bunch of beta readers. Some of those beta readers were really established authors, and I was kind of at a loss that the publisher wasn't. It needed editorial work, absolutely. That's what I need, that help, and I fully own that. But the story I believed in, so I didn't really agree with the publisher's viewpoint. And I went back and talked to some of the writers. One of my friends writes with the biggest name in publishing, and basically agreed with me and said, no, I don't agree. I don't agree with that finding. And I said, well, so I kind of had two choices: either go back and rewrite a book or make pretty dramatic changes to please the publisher, or just kindly tell them not going to happen. So I went with the latter. I went with saying, hey, I appreciate all you did with The Body Man, but I won't deliver a new book now. I won't redo this book. So I had a parting of ways. I got the rights back for the Breach of Trust, which was good. And but I didn't want to be one of those. I didn't want one of those people that just said, well, it's my way or the highway, and I got to be right if I wrote it. So I did put it aside for a while, just to say, let me look at it again with fresh eyes, which I looked at again really over the spring this year. And, I think that was the right decision to not go back and rewrite it, basically. So
how does that work necessarily with publishing contracts? Because I know in the movie business, just talking with some friends who, do some acting, it's really hard to, get out of some of those contracts.
Yeah, you just have to look at the legal verbiage, basically. And in the verbiage, I had the right, the publisher had the right to reject the manuscript. I had the right to say, tough, I'm not going to rewrite. They can't make you write anew. Now, what the publisher could have done is said, I'm not going to release you and we're just going to have a stalemate for indefinite period of time. And they technically then would own the publishing rights to The Body Man and 2 sequels. And I could just say, forget you, I'm not going to write 2 sequels. You've already got The Body Man. And we could have just parted that way. I think we probably just both put our heels in the dirt pretty firm, and we were both adamant on our stance. And fortunately, the publisher realized I wasn't going to bend on that, and they decided to just do the right thing and let me out.
Yeah, well, I know from like listening to Jack Carr's interview on Joe Rogan, I think he said this a few times, but Joe Rogan's like, how do you always, write so many of these books every year? And I think Jack Carr said something like, well, because I have to, because Simon and Schuster makes me write 1 book per year or something like that. And I'm always like,
Yeah.
man, that's crazy that some of these guys, get mandated to, write 1 book a year or, something.
Well, and also, too, I would not compare myself. So I don't know Jack's
Right.
contract by any stretch, but I guarantee you Jack's probably got a pretty good money stream. And
Yeah.
I guarantee Atria wants to keep Jack happy
Oh,
because
yeah.
they probably make quite a lot of money off Jack's books. Publishers always make more money than anybody else. The author gets the least
Yeah.
amount. That's a trade secret. It's not trade secret. It's out. It's well known. The authors get the least.
Yeah.
So that's a mutual relationship where they want to keep each other happy. He wants to make money. Atria wants him to deliver a book. And I've know Jack, and I've seen a lot of his interviews as well. And I don't believe he's had much editorial feedback, negative feedback, when he submits his manuscripts. They pretty much go with what he says. And as someone at his level and skill set, I probably would let him say whatever he wanted to say as well. So
Yeah, well, given his experience, just kind of his story, outside of being an author too. I mean, he's one of the few authors I would say that I could actually describe as like an actual real life resident badass, considering that he was, actually in the SEAL teams. And it's funny
correct.
because, I've actually always pictured him in the James Reese role, for his character. I know he
Mm-hmm.
always says that, Chris Pratt, and I'm like, I mean, I like Chris Pratt, but I still always see Jack's face
Yeah,
as James Reese whenever I read the book. I mean, that's not to say Chris Pratt did an amazing job
right.
in The Terminalist. I don't know if you had a chance to watch that, but it's pretty
I I did.
good.
I've only seen it once, and I binged it the week it came out. I was invited to. I was invited on a podcast. I think it was the No Thrills Mitch Rapp podcast, and they were doing a breakdown of it. And they asked me to do the last 2 episodes, like give a commentary on my thoughts and go through it.
Yeah,
So I had to watch, like, I don't know how many episodes there were, 10, 8? I don't remember now.
they
Um,
they were right.
Okay, I had to watch
I
them all in
think.
like 3 or 4 nights, so I like had to double up every night to watch them. So, and I thought they were, they were a departure from the book, of course, in some
Yeah,
form, but not dramatic departure. And I mean, I thought, considering it was Hollywood, I thought they did a really good job, which I also think was due to the fact as well that Jack was executive producer. He was involved with the scripts. He was on set. There was one of the times I had probably contacted him a little bit more at that point. There was a time I texted him, and he was on set when I texted him, and so I didn't get the message for a little bit, and so he messaged me back that he was on set, and so I sent him back a text to say, "Hey, tell Chris Pratt whatever it was, blah blah blah," and so he immediately texted me back. He's like, "Ah, you just missed him. He's back. He's back shooting scene." I'm like, "Rats."
that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I think, for guys like him, obviously, I think publishers do want to, be pretty differential towards, him, especially with his, veteran status and the fact that he knows what he's talking about. But on the other hand, you have, more average Joes like you and I, and the publishers, tend to kind of scoff. And I think it's interesting. And the other thing that I've kind of noticed, not just from talking to you, but a few other people have actually said, well, I'm not getting really paid anything, so going independent seems to be better. So
Yeah.
With that, what was your kind of experience doing that?
What did I get paid?
No, I mean, what was the experience of
well,
self-publishing
well,
versus?
well, I will say this first of all. So I would never talk details, and most people don't talk details. A lot of people put out books and don't make there's people that pay money to put
Yeah,
a book out. Even though I went with a small publisher, I didn't have to pay for anything. If I chose to market it, that was on me. But I didn't have
yeah,
to pay for I know someone that had to pay for their editorial. I know people that have had to pay for cover, lots of different things. Even though it was a small publisher, I actually did get a book advance, which is unusual for some small publishers, especially really small ones. And I didn't have to pay a dime, and I earned out my advance. I don't know. It took me about 8 weeks, 7 weeks. So I sold well. I no complaints. Um, didn't make any tremendous amount of money. I probably make more in 2 weeks of my 9 to 5 job than I did, making a year worth of book sales.
yeah,
But I still earned out and made the publisher good money. I made a lot less because the percentages are horrific. But I was just grateful that with the first book, you can fall flat on your face, and I didn't fall flat on my face. Um,
yeah,
Now, fast forward to leaving the publisher, and I'm going to take a step back for a second. So, like with Ransomed Daughter, because we talked a little bit about separating from the publisher, I didn't want to self-publish, and I didn't want to self-publish because I don't believe there's a stigma to self-publishing. I don't think that, well, a traditional publisher means you're a really good author, and if you self-publish, you're a real crappy author. Nothing could be further from the truth. I know self-published authors that I think write
yeah,
just as good as the Jack Carrs or the Brad Thors or the Stephen Kings, or name your big name author. I've read some self-published people that write just as well. They just don't happen to get that contract. They don't get that deal, and they decide that they don't want to forever be pitching to an agent and trying to get a publisher, and they self-publish. So I have a lot of respect for folks that do that. Why I didn't want to self-publish was I learned enough about the industry, and I knew how much work it was to self-publish. I wanted to write, not to become a publisher, because essentially,
yeah,
if you self-publish, you're a publisher. You're Some people do everything themselves. They do the writing, the editing, the cover design, the marketing, the layout, all of it.
yeah.
That's where I think it's a little bit more dangerous for folks. Not to say there's anything wrong with doing it, but I think when you put a product out, you have to put the best product imaginable out. And it's really difficult for one person to do all those pieces well. And
Sure.
me knowing I can't do that. So when I decided to go down that path with Ransomed Daughter, I thought the only way I would do that is, first of all, I had learned a lot since I wrote my first book in 2014. So I had a lot of years under my belt of learning a lot of stuff. And also I built up some good contacts so I could hire someone to do a cover. I could hire someone to do professional editing. I do a lot of the marketing myself. I do
Yeah.
pay for advertising for Facebook and different things like that, but I do a lot of the nuts and bolts stuff on my own. And I have a business degree, so the finance side of it, the setting up the company, because I went all out and I set up a legal entity. I set up an imprint name for the book. I hired a graphic designer to create logos and all that kind of stuff. So I really tried to treat it as I'm creating a small business. I'm creating a
Oh,
book
cool.
imprint.
Yeah.
So, but it's a lot of flipping work. And for myself, I will say, when you get to do all that, what don't you do? You don't
Yeah.
write hardly at all. That's the hard part. But with all the work I've put into Ransomed Daughter and everything I've got now in place after about 6 months of work, I'll be in a much better position for what comes out next, because I've kind of I've laid the groundwork. So now I can step back on some of that, and I can just pay people to do their part, and I can more oversee it and then focus more on writing.
Well, it's interesting that you say that in regards to all the marketing and all the stuff that you have to do,
Mm-hmm.
in regards to the book. And I certainly kind of, in my experience, I noticed the same thing. It does take a lot of work to do all the marketing for the book. But kind of just speaking from my perspective, doing this podcast, the Whitfield Report, for as long as I've had to do, like, I've done like all the graphics and a lot of the stuff myself. From day one, especially since back when I started podcasting, people still really didn't know what podcasting was. It wasn't
Right.
part of it wasn't part of the lexicon,
The lexicon, yeah.
like it is now. And doing self-publishing, it was actually my grandfather, who said, "Well, why don't you just self-publish it? You're already doing like all this marketing and whatnot for, your show. It'll just kind of be the same thing for the, for a book." And actually, it's actually kind of nice now, because one of the things that a lot of podcasters do that I kind of find to be just a little bit cringy in some parts is you have a lot of podcasters who will, whether or not they're doing a podcast or a live stream, they'll have like a donation link, and like 5 or 6 times an episode they'll go like, please, please donate, kind of like the e-begging thing. And that's never really sat well with me. So instead of, a couple times during the show, I'm like, hey, I have this book here, American Instinct, you can buy off Amazon. And, so I'm selling a product, instead of just
you're promoting your product instead of promoting give me money just to listen to me talk or whatever.
Yeah, and people actually, like that more. So it's actually kind of, for me at least, because I've had the podcast before, it's kind of been a nice vehicle to be like, hey, you guys know me for this one thing, but, did you guys also know I can write fiction? So,
Well, the other thing I'd say real quick too on the marketing is, the market's changed. It used to be, probably now over 20 years or 20 plus years ago, you wrote a book, you gave it to your publisher, you had an agent, you gave it to your publisher, or the agent gave it to the publisher, and then your job's kind of done. You might have to do some media stuff, but kind of low key. Just go back to your cabin, with Theodore Kaczynski and write your next book, basically. Not the case anymore. I don't care. And of course, you brought Carr up, and Carr is probably the pinnacle of the examples, but even people that don't have his clout or his brand, as a writer, you're still out there. The publisher expects you to market, expects you to go do podcasts, expects you to do print media if you can get on TV shows. Or I was on a radio show a couple days ago for Western North Carolina. The publisher expects that, and even for you to go, I have like very successful author friends that they pay out of their own pocket Facebook ads for their books, And so these are people that make an income off writing that are still pouring money into the marketing themselves, and they have a big name publisher. So it's just a different world now. You have to be able to do all this, and some people do it better than others, of course, but it's expected. And that's just if you have a traditional publishing deal, or maybe a small publisher, of course, small publisher as well. If you're self-published, you have zero options. If unless you want to sell 10 books, you better get out there and you better learn one word: hustle. And if you don't like to hustle, you better learn another word: poverty. You're not going to sell any if you're trying to live off your book sales, because you're going to not have a dime.
Yeah, no, and I mean, that's kind of the other thing is, like, I have a freelance, business, which is kind of what I do, day to day, and and then the podcast and whatnot, those are kind of like, in the book, those are secondary, incomes. I'm hoping to get to the point where I can really hone, it to the point where, I can make it full time. That would be awesome. But, in the meantime, it, certainly, it does. And I have a communications degree. So actually, like, marketing and whatnot is what I do for a living. Kind of. So, it's what I always tell people is, if you're planning on, writing or making, or doing, film writing too, that's even more of a case of,
Mm-hmm.
you're not gonna be making $1 million, your first book, unless you've got like a
Right.
really good debut novel, and even then, it's really who
Yeah.
in the publishing world, and if you don't know anyone, well, then you're kind of, SOL.
Well,
So
that term starving artists doesn't reflect on a few starving artists.
right,
That's telling you that if you have an artistic type of a job or role you're trying to do, yeah, most of them are starving. Whether
yeah,
you're a writer, whether you're an actor, whether you're a painter, a musician. I'm friends with a very successful music band, and my son
yeah,
likes to play music, and I keep telling him, that's great. I hope you're phenomenal at this, but you better learn a trade or you better go to college and get a degree, because if you think that's
yeah.
going to, if you're just going to become the next big thing musician wise, I believe you can. And I tell him that because I do believe he can, but you also have to pay the bills. And
Well, Well, it's funny you mentioned that because one of my favorite, bands, The Police, Sting was a teacher before he became
yeah,
a pop star, and
before I became a pop star, yeah. I'm
yeah,
friends with the band Shinedown. Eric Bass was, I think he did roofing. He did something construction, but I think it was roofing or framing. The bassist, Barry Kirch, who's the drummer, he had a biology degree, if I recall, and he was out
yeah,
work taking like water samples in ponds in Jacksonville before he got the drummer gig at Shinedown. So yeah, it's Gene Simmons from Kiss taught English. I mean,
yeah,
and the amazing thing is, if you're around musicians, there's some really, really, really good musicians, and I go to them frequently at like local breweries and places like that. They're really good. They do a great job. They make $50 a night, on a gig.
yeah,
You can't provide on that, so it's so hard. And that's the same thing with writing. So I will say real quick, I've been doing a lot of research with it, especially with coming out with my own brand, just to look at numbers as much as, because the publishing industry tries to keep them hidden, so as much as you can. And some of the
yeah,
stuff came out when Penguin tried to merge. Was it Penguin and Simon and Schuster? I think it was Penguin and Simon Schuster tried to merge. I might have that wrong, but it was two of the big. We were going to go from Big Five to Big Four. So a lot of numbers came out with that. It was public knowledge at that point because of the antitrust case the government brought out against them. And so Publishers Weekly had a big article about it, which I sent to someone a couple days ago. A couple years old stats, but the stats are that 10 books or fewer a year sell 1 million copies.
yeah,
500 books or fewer a year sell 100,000 copies. The average published author, traditionally published, not small, not self-published, the average traditionally published author sells 500 copies of a book in its lifetime.
yeah,
And self-published is 50 or less. The average self-published person will sell 50 or less. Now, do some self-published people sell 10, 20, 30,000? Yes. But there's a lot of self-published people that sell 2 or 3 or 4. They don't have any sales. So in Amazon, anyone can upload a book. So those numbers get skewed pretty good, because if you get hundreds of thousands of books uploaded a year, the numbers for sales aren't going to look very good. I could write about. So we're filming on a Monday night. I could 100% do my day job, and for the evenings between now and Friday, if I didn't have my kids, I'm going to have my kids Wednesday through Friday, but say I didn't have my kids for a week, I could write a novella or a short story between now and Friday. Wouldn't be good, wouldn't be something I should publish, but I could get it in a format, and I have all the software and all the stuff to do everything. I could have it uploaded to Amazon by Saturday and print copies out on Monday of next week.
yeah,
100% I could do that. Should I do that? 100% no. But that's how easy the entry is
yeah,
to publishing now, which is a downside. But the upside, of course, is that publishers are so hard to get your foot in the door with them now, that really good authors and people that are pretty good authors can still become published authors because of the Amazon and Ingram Spark and the systems that are out there.
yeah. No, it's funny that you mentioned that because I actually
I'm off my soapbox now too, by the way. That's
I well, it's actually kind of it's funny you mentioned this. And I hope there's one person, I'm not going to name who it is, but there's one person who I hope is watching this because I sold like around 40 copies of my book Shadows of Deception in the first month, which
Hmm.
was July. And my friend was like, "You only sold like 40 copies," and I'm like, "That's actually really good considering that there are
Yeah.
some there are some published authors with way who actually have contracts and whatnot with way higher exposure than I do that
Yeah.
only have sold like 12 copies or so maybe."
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
so
I have a friend who publishes overseas, and they were telling me a couple years ago when we were really getting the numbers, they were saying there are people that in Britain that have hard copies available at the British bookstores, and they've sold like 50 hard copies of their book, and they're a well-known author in Britain. They're not some self-published. This is a traditionally published person. They sell like
yeah,
50 copies, and that's not a one in a million story either, unfortunately. So yeah, it's I've sold really well, and I've sold. I haven't looked at my sales numbers for Ransomed Daughter. It's been out not quite a week. It'll be a week tomorrow. One of my friends reached out a couple nights ago, and he's like, "What are the sales looking like?" And I said, "I don't know." He goes, "What do you mean you don't
I
know?" I said, "I'm not going to look." "What do you mean you're not going to look?" I said, "Well, I have a job to do right now. My job is to do stuff like this: promote the book, ads, do all the stuff I do with social media, bring in people to help with that as well. And if I look at numbers, high probability I'll be disappointed
yeah,
because I expect my numbers to grow, especially after what Body Man did. I expect better numbers for the next one. And I expect, and I don't want that in my head to then say, oh, do I need to change my marketing plan? Do I need to implement something else? For at least for now, it's just like, you know what, the numbers are going to be the numbers. I'm not going to get lost in that. I know what my pre-orders were, and my pre-orders exceeded what the average small or self-published person does in their lifetime for that book. So my pre-orders already had that knocked out. So I know I'm going to do
I
okay, and I'm grateful
I
for it.
was I was one of those
Thank
pre-orders.
you.
By the way, it's funny because
Thank you for
you
that.
sent me you're more than welcome. No, it's funny because I remember you messaged me and asked me, would you like a gala
Hmm.
copy? And it's funny because literally the day before you messaged me that I think was when I had pre-ordered your book,
Okay,
Ransomed
gotcha.
Daughter.
Cool.
So and then just about a week ago, it just popped up, on Amazon. Your pre-order,
Yep.
has arrived. So I'm like, oh, that's cool. Right as
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of writing my second,
Hmm.
novella too. That's one other thing I wanted to ask you about is why do a novella this time as opposed to a full blown
Great
novel.
question. Um, Part of it is what we talked about earlier. I expected Breach of Trust to come out. I actually thought it would come out probably early this year, a year ago when I was
Uh
writing
huh.
and editing and doing all that stuff. And so once it didn't, and once I look it wasn't going to, in some ways I had egg on my face, and I kind of learned a good lesson because I had been promoting Breach of Trust. I had been putting on social media when I finished the drafts, and I had a lot of people messaging me and saying, I can't wait to read this book. What you're talking about sounds really cool. And then there I am left with, well, it might still come out, but it won't come out from that publisher.
Right.
And so I kind of had to pivot at that point. So this was probably the end of 2022, early 2023. Like I said before, I wanted to take a step back because I didn't want my ego to say put Breach of Trust out. I wanted to put out a good book for my fans and also for myself. I don't want to put out something that I go back and look at later and go, man, you dialed that in. That was a crappy book. No, this is a book that mainly I write for myself and my kids.
Yeah.
I want my kids to be able to read this book when they're older and be proud of me, and to see the little nuggets of stuff I put in there that nobody will ever understand, but that means something to my family or to my mom or me or my dad or my brother or sister or whoever, family, friends. I had a friend real quick, did a signing this weekend, and several of my friends came, which was really cool. I get great support from family and friends, but one of the guys that came is a guy I killed in The Body Man, and we can talk about that in a few minutes. And I had him sign the book too, and I'm like, he goes, "You okay?" And my buddy was like, "Are you okay with that?" I'm like, "Dude, Mickey Mouse could sign this book. It would be fine with me. I don't have any ego issues with that. Please, it would be an honor." I actually filmed him with my phone signing the book, and took a picture and all that. We had a blast. But yeah, no. So getting to that point where all that's happened, what I had to do this year was decide, okay, what am I going to do with Breach of Trust? And I think I'm going to put it out, is what my thought process was then. But that's a big undertaking, and I don't know that I'm ready for it. So why don't I try to put out something else that's a little bit, not to say less to chew on. It's a great story, and I'm proud of it, but it was a little bit less effort from an editorial standpoint. So if you publish a novella or a full-size novel, it's kind of the same work when it comes to marketing, cover design, all that kind of stuff. That doesn't change. Whether it's 100 pages or 400 pages, you're going to have the same effort. But from an editorial standpoint, you're talking a big difference, because I've probably read this book, I don't know, 20 times since February, thereabouts. Yeah. So reading a 150-page book 20 times versus a 400 to 450-page book 20 times, that's a huge time difference.
Oh yeah. Totally.
So that was one of the drivers of, I said, well, I've got this story, and it was a story I'd actually wrote years ago. So the quick version of this is that I wrote 3 books in the Troy Evans world, 2014 through about 2017. I wrote 3 Troy Evans novels, and I wasn't able to get a publisher or an agent. And I pitched them, went to New York City. I had some good feedback, but I kept getting the doors closed in my face. Well, while I'm waiting for all those doors to slam in my face, I started writing novellas for Troy and the Omega Group. So I don't remember what year the first draft on this was done, but it was a while back. So earlier this year, before I wanted to pull the trigger on Breach of Trust, I said, well, why don't I take something that I'm really proud of, that I know is a good story, and why don't I try to focus on putting that out first? So that's kind of how So I went through all the stuff I had for Troy Evans, and Ransomed Daughter was the one that kind of popped at me and said, this story needs to come out. So I sent it to some friends, and it was still rough. And I said, and they're a lot of times friends will just tell you, hey, you did a great job. Boy, this is the best thing you've written. And they're totally full of crap because you wrote a piece of crap. It's horrible. But they're friends, and they don't want to be the jerk that says you suck. I have friends that will tell me I suck, so they do.
As do I.
Which is great. That's what you need. You need thick skin, which no one really has totally thick skin, but you need to have someone put you in your place with writing, or you're going to put out lousy things. So I gave it to several friends, and I said, straight up truth, I need it. And they're all like, dude, publish this thing. And I'm like, that's what I need to hear. So then I sent it to some author friends who I know they're going to be nice in the author world with me because of our relationship. But one in particular, I made a deal with him years ago. And he said, I'll read anything you ever write with one caveat. I will flat out tell you exactly what I think. And if it's good enough to publish and everything, I won't miss any words with you. And I said, I love you. That's what I need you to do for me. I don't need you to say, great job, Eric. And then I put out a turd. So that person said the same thing. And actually, well, that person's on the cover, so that's how good they liked it. They gave me my blurb. So that kind of let me know I was going down the right path. So then it was just rewrite, edit, get it fixed until I finally brought the professional editor in, which was in, I think, July, end of July, early August. And I got it back within a pretty quick period of time because it's a novella, so they could edit it fast.
Yeah.
So that was the path. Sorry, long answer. That was the path to coming out with that. And I also got my feet wet for starting my own thing. Now, when I pivot for next year and come out with Breach of Trust, I've kind of done that legwork. You know, I know how to do the formatting. I bought formatting software, and it's a piece of cake. An intoxicated monkey could format a book with this software I have.
What do you?
When I did it, no, I'm kidding. I wasn't.
What do you use? Just out of curiosity.
So there's 2 great ones to use. Vellum is one, which I don't use. That's what if you have a Mac. you want to use vellum. Vellum's really good. I use Atticus, which
Ah,
might even have a monkey on its little software thing. That's might have been where my brain said a drunk monkey or something.
yeah,
It's actually a monkey, but it took me about 4 hours. The first night I worked on it, about 2 hours into it, I was starting to like pull out what little hair I had left because I'm a man and I'm a fool and I don't watch any tutorials. I just go, whatever, hit buttons. I can figure this shit out. What in the world? This crap out. Yeah, no, I really. So I sat down and watched a couple of the videos. I'm like, oh, that's where that is. Oh, that's how I can change the formatting. It is
yeah.
idiot, but I'm an idiot. So
I'm going to get I think I'm going to get Atticus for this second book that I'm
Real
working on.
quick, 100 at least unless it's changed in the last couple months, $147. You have the. It's not a one-time thing. It is a one-time payment. You can use it for any of your books.
Yeah,
So and they do updates and everything. So it's I've probably formatted that book now 10 different times in a bunch of different ways, and I like it even more every time I've used it. So
I
100% I'll sing their praises. I'll advertise for them.
I
So
looked at Vellum, and
yeah,
because I actually I have a Mac,
okay,
but I have Apple everything. People, and people in this podcast fan base give me a shit because I'm such a big Apple nerd. But even so, one of the things that yeah, very nice. I've still got a 14 Pro,
oh,
but
I think that's what this is. This is a 14 Pro. This is not the one that just I got this in like April.
yeah,
So
no,
yeah,
I got this I got this back in like August.
okay,
So but yeah, I looked at Vellum and I was like, yeah, for the price tag, I can get really nice headphones for the price of.
yeah. I think Vellum's like 300 plus, maybe
Yeah,
400.
yeah. It's like 300. It's like, man, I can get the
Yeah,
AirPods Max for for the price of this. Well, and then I'd use the for my first book, for my first novella, I used the Kindle Crate software,
okay,
which is just a free one that and I mean it worked fine, but there were a couple of
yeah.
different like formatting things, like you can't split the book into parts like you can with you know with
Like
something.
do a part one, part two,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, you can't do that
okay,
in the Kindle Crate. Not a big problem because this was just the first because this was just the first novella. I wanted to see if this would sell,
mm-hmm.
before I invested in any software. But
Yeah.
now that I do know that, I definitely think I'll um get Atticus.
Yeah,
But
and we can
anyway,
talk offline about it too. Reach out to me. We'll talk offline. I'll kind of give you some pointers on it. I'll be glad to spend some time with
yeah,
you on it. But yeah, I plan on using it for the two books coming out next year. I'll be working on that early next year to format the first one, I'm sure. But yeah, and it's something that you can definitely pay someone to format. It's not super expensive, but it's not like cheap either. And literally, to at least for me, my thought process is if you spend $150 on a software and you have it for life, I can edit. I can fully get the book in the format I
yeah,
want in less than a day. Like a Saturday or a couple evenings. Piece of cake. Why
yeah,
pay someone a couple $100 or whatever to do that? Plus, I like the control side of it, that I get to go in there and decide, hey, this is what my headers are going to look like. This is where I'm going to, you got to get to just choose your
yeah,
layout. And it has multiple options for layout as well. It's not just a
right.
layout A, layout B. You have like 20 or 30 layout options that I've even found, and there might be more of them on there.
One of the things, though, getting back to just the general novella format, I remember one of my friends. So I kind of written like a story arc for my show for my novella series about like 10 years ago. I've kind of had this thing cooking in my brain for the past 10 years, and then I went off to college, so it took a bit of a back burner because
Mm-hmm.
with all the writing I had to do in college, especially as an English major,
Yeah.
not a lot of time to free write. Actually,
Right.
you write a lot of essays, and then your brain is just fried from doing all that.
Yes.
So, but when I finally, when I was finally free of college, so to speak, and could find time to go back, I actually pitched the outline to a friend of mine, and they were like, "Well, why doesn't this need to be a novel? Why not just do like a novella or a series of like short stories?"
Mm-hmm.
Um, nobody nobody really, now this is coming from like a 25-year-old, but he said, nobody really reads like these, 500-600 page um novels
Yeah.
anymore. And I said, well, I do. And he said, well, yeah, but you're a book nerd. But he said most people just generally don't have time. So I was
Right.
kind of like, well, that's so I kind of pitched it. Would you rather I write like a full blown novel, or kind of do a novella, kind of doing like market research? And a lot of people were like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, I would read like a shorter novel, which is kind of a novella is. So that was
Yeah.
kind of what I ended up doing. And I think it's funny because um my book is only like, I think, like 136 pages,
Okay.
if I'm not. And it's funny because there are people who are like, oh, I'll blow through this in one weekend. And I'm like, so did you finish it? And they're like, and this is like 2 weeks later, and they're like, no, I just got really busy. I'm halfway through it, but I still haven't finished
Right.
it. And I'm like, and you were the people that gave me shit for the length being too short. So
Right. Right.
I just
Yeah.
kind of find them to be funny.
I like the format for it. I had that question. I've done obviously a bunch of podcasts in the last couple of months gearing up for the book coming out, and um, I'm busy, and I'm busy by choice, so it's not a complaint.
Yeah.
I'm on the go a lot. I mean, I was home yesterday. I was home Sunday, and I actually did end up leaving. I was thinking I wasn't even going to leave the house, and I'm like, I need to go hiking or something. And I'm like, it's cool out. I haven't golfed in 3 months because I live in the South. So I threw my golf clubs in the car, went out by myself. I literally played. There's a small 9-hole course here in my town. It's not executive. It's got par fives and everything, but it's not super long. I played it. I walked it. I have a push cart. I'm like an old man. I've got a push cart. I don't carry it in my bag, or my
Uh-huh.
back, but I don't drive a cart either. I got a pull cart or push cart, whatever you want to call it. Man, I played that an hour and 20 minutes. I shot like 6 over par. I haven't played in 3 months, and I was just kind of like, "Yes, man, I'm living the dream here." It was cool. I had a
Yeah.
sweatshirt with me. I didn't need it, but I almost needed it. But yeah, I've been the weekend before I had my kids. Weekend before that, I was down in Florida. I went and saw Shinedown. Next weekend, I have a book event. Following weekend after that, my son and I are going to Vegas to see U2.
Oh, nice.
Then I have another thing, and then we go to Connecticut. Yeah, it's just those are nice until I went and bought a flight finally, like a couple of weeks ago, and then I looked at hotels, and I'm just like, kid,
Uh,
this is your Christmas present for the next 5 years. I was like, holy crap! The concert tickets were the cheap thing, unfortunately, but whew,
really, I
I was shocked. My
yeah.
brain was telling me Vegas, it'll be super cheap flight. I can go stay at a cheapy hotel. I don't know what's going on that weekend besides the concert, but they are apparently charging premium, or I'm an idiot because I looked everywhere, Expedia, I looked everything, but yeah,
Yeah.
I I won't be able to cover that with book sales. Probably, I'll just say that I'll need to dip into some 9 to 5 paycheck money to
Yeah,
pay.
yeah, no, that's always
But no, I'm
that's a
taking him to see the U2 at the Sphere. His first concert, when he was 10, I took him to see the Joshua Tree in Louisville, Kentucky, and so
oh
that was his
wow.
first music experience. And I'm a diehard U2 favorite band of my life, so I've seen him a bunch, and that was just an amazing concert. And so this
Yeah.
summer, when we were looking at concerts. And I've taken, since I know Shinedown, I've taken him to see Shinedown shows. I took him to see Guns N' Roses a couple months ago. My parents didn't take me to concerts, so and I won't go the full list, but I took him to U2, took him to the Rolling Stones. We did Garth Brooks. We've done the Eagles. I mean, like Bon Jovi. We did Bon Jovi floor seats. Those were a little pricey too. Their on the floor was like woo, but I want those memories with him. That we can go out there and do that, and he'll years from now he'll be able to, instead of saying, "Yeah, my dad sucked, we never did anything," but at least I expect him to say, "My dad took me to see Bon Jovi, U2, Guns N' Roses."
I'm definitely proud of you for for making sure that your boy knows all the classics too. So.
I don't know if my ex-wife would be happy I'm taking him to Vegas. I don't know if she knows yet. I think she knows. I guess she's gonna find out. But yeah.
Well,
I'm not letting him roam off on me. I told him I have to actually work one of the days, so I'm like, we're just chilling in the hotel. He's like, I can't go out. I was like, no. You're not going out exploring. You're 16 years old. I don't want the court talking to me when I get back. I was like, nope, you're with me.
Yeah. Well, at least he knows who, U2 and some of these other, bands are, so.
He's not the traditional 16-year-old. He's not on his phone. He's not on social media. He doesn't like modern music. And he basically, on a frequent basis, says, Dad, you grew up in the 80s. The 80s rocked. This decade sucks. I wish I grew up in the 80s. So he loves classic rock. He just bought himself a leather jacket. I finally saw it today for the first time. He got it a couple days ago when he was with his mom, and got a leather jacket, and he's got I bought him some aviators for Christmas, so he's got Tom Cruise aviators. So he's looks like a little stud basically.
Yeah,
so.
my ex girlfriend towards the end of our relationship, she's like, you listen to all this like old man music, and I'm like okay. I'm like, okay, we're finished. No, exactly. I mean that wasn't the death blow, but it was kind of like one of the.
It's a good reason to put a nail in the coffin. Put it that way. If you start dogging real good music,
it was kind of like, I don't know if I want to have kids with you. So
exactly.
But
my advice on that's really simple. Just stay single for a long time. If you think you like to travel, go do a lot of traveling, especially before your mid-30s or so. Go out and see as much as you can. I did travel a lot actually before kids, and I traveled some during kids. I'm traveling now more after divorce and all that, only because I have every other weekend free. Yeah. So like last Thanksgiving, actually, I didn't have my kids. It was the first time since the divorce and everything. I didn't have them for like 10 days straight at Thanksgiving, and I knew it ahead of time. It wasn't like a shock. So I was like, man, what the heck am I going to do? And I said, well, maybe I'll go. I don't want to stay home. I'll be depressed. Maybe I'll go up to Connecticut, visit family. And I've got amazing friends. So my friends around here were like, hey, come spend the holiday with us. And they've done that for Christmas before. I always have my kids on Christmas, but it alternates years, whether I have them in the morning in the week before Christmas, or do I have them the afternoon in the week after Christmas? So that kind of switches every year. And so I've had friends that have had me come stay at their house for breakfast in the morning, since I don't have my kids till the afternoon. But so for last year with Thanksgiving, my buddy that's the security director for Shinedown was like, well, why don't you come over and why don't you go to a show in the UK? And I'm like, I can't come to a show in the UK. He's like, maybe you can. So I start looking around, and wouldn't you know, it's actually less expensive to fly to Europe on Thanksgiving Day, because most Americans want to see their family, not fly to Europe for Thanksgiving. So I guess it was the night before. I boarded a flight the night before out of Atlanta. I landed in London Thanksgiving morning. I took a 2-hour train up to Cardiff, Wales, and by that evening I was out with John and Barry, and we're having Italian dinner on Thanksgiving Day in Cardiff, and then going out drinking after that.
Oh, awesome.
Best Thanksgiving ever. It was so much better than a family Thanksgiving. I love my family, but yeah, I know what I'll be doing next year when I have them this year, so we'll have a family Thanksgiving. Next year, I've already told one of my friends, I'll be international for Thanksgiving. I don't know which country. I don't know where we're going. I don't know if you'll be around. If not, I'll find someone else. But I'm out of there next year for Thanksgiving. So
That's pretty
unless I find a
nice.
woman
So,
between now and Thanksgiving next year, but she'll just have to understand that. No, I'm not going to be around for Thanksgiving. You can come if you
yeah,
want,
who,
but
yeah, you're single again, so just enjoy that for a while. So,
so for any of your listeners that have been through the horrific thing that is separation and divorce, and I'm joking about it, but it's not anything jokeable. It's
right.
very much one of the hardest things you'll go through in life. But I had some great advice when I went through it, through a writing friend actually, and he said, "Hey, do me a favor. Once your divorce finalizes." And this is a pretty true statement. Guys are normally fairly desperate losers when it comes to not doing, especially if you've been married for a while. It's hard to be
Yeah.
alone. I'll tell you, it's really difficult to not have a wife or not have kids anymore half the time. It's just it's messes with you.
Mm-hmm.
But so my buddy said, once everything finalizes, spend 2 years, go find who Eric Bishop is, write some novels, travel. Don't run into the arms of another woman. And so I was like, I don't know about that, but I'll try it. Yeah, I didn't go on a date for 2.5 years until after my divorce finalized. This summer is when I actually delved into the world of dating and dating apps, which I must say, uh,
Ugh.
shit show is the
Yeah.
kindest way to describe that world.
Oh
But
yeah.
I was married for 18 years, so like when I got married, there wasn't the cell phones were like clunky. You couldn't
Yeah.
book flights and do online banking and find a woman that might not be a woman. Because who knows what's really on the app. You didn't have any of
Right.
that crap. So now, flip side of technology and having all that, I'm like, isn't there like a traditional way to meet someone? And apparently not. But so yeah, I'm happily single at this point. I'm gladly meet someone at some point, but I kind of like doing my own thing. I like now. Thanksgiving last year. If I want to go to Europe for Thanksgiving, I don't have to ask anybody. I don't have to get
Yeah.
permission. I don't have to be like, "Where'd you go?" I just do whatever it is I feel is the right thing to do, and I have to deal with the consequences of it, not anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's like you
Totally
said.
not book related, but life related.
No, well, I mean, it's also it's funny that you mentioned that because getting back to the book, one of the negative reviews I actually got on one of my books is there aren't enough female characters in this thing, and I'm like, well, I'm writing out special ops, and
Yeah.
I know there are a few women, but not that many. And besides, what am I gonna do? Just make one up out of thin air? And you know, I don't know. It's character creation is always a bit weird. I find
Yeah.
kind of.
Oh, absolutely. So that segue is good to what will hopefully come out a year from now. So sometime next spring or summer, the sequel to The Body Man, which we can't see over there in the corner very well, Breach of Trust will come out, which really does start off pretty much right after The Body Man ends, story wise. And then next fall or winter of 2024, not the sequel, but the next story for Troy and the Omega Group will come out, which happens to have a female special forces character, actually. So I dive into that world with that story. And
Did
that's going to be that'll be a fun one to get out. That one has some work still to do to it, so I'll probably be working on that in the spring to get that to the editor by summer to play this whole game again of putting something out, but not game, but the whole
I'm
rigmarole.
yeah. I might have asked you this question on Facebook, but I'm not sure if I did. Are the is the Body Man tied to the Troy Evans universe, or vi- or vice
Is
versa? Or
it?
have you not figured
Is it? Um, I
the
will
Bishop
say that
verse?
if you read the final read the final chapter. Chapter 30. Is it on 30? Hold on, I've got it right here. Yeah, read the epilogue. Read the epilogue in Ransomed Daughter. Probably what I gave you a while ago didn't have what I'm referring to now.
Okay,
But
okay, yeah, I haven't.
I will say this: they exist in the same universe. These characters they are separate stories. So the
Yeah,
Bodyman story is separate from Troy Evans and the Omega Group. But to not be coy and shy, absolutely, I'm going to set it up so that at some point down the line, we're going to have a reason for all these fun people to go do some crazy stuff together.
yeah. That's kind of that's kind of what I kind of gleaned that was the case, but I also know some
Yeah.
other authors who just do completely different,
Right.
and I'm kind of doing the same thing that you are. I'm kind of building a universe through kind of
Mhm.
multiple novella series. To manage two is kind of like that's a lot of extra work. So, um,
It's not
it,
for the faint at heart, for sure. And speaking
yeah,
of female characters, too, one of the stories that I need to get back to, it's probably going to take me another year before I even entertain diving back into it, is um, Merci, one of the characters from the Body Man, the assassin.
I was
I
I was
Okay,
actually going to ask where you got the inspiration for her from.
um, the inspiration was I wanted obviously a strong female character. I wanted an assassin, and when I wrote the first draft of the Body Man, and she was in it. That was probably like 2018. It was a long time ago. Um, I didn't know her backstory. I didn't really know. She was fully developed with what you read for her in the Body Man, but it was only what was in the Body Man. There wasn't like this
Yeah,
huge. This is how she got to that point. I didn't even know what it was in my head. It wasn't until I was separated, actually, and right before I got divorced is when I started writing her novel, which I've got several different working titles on, and I don't even remember what I've last put on the manuscript. But I wrote about a third of her own standalone, and it's tied into the Supreme Court, and is like there's a lot of cool stuff in that story. And then I was about a third done with that book, and then I got the contract offer for The Body Man and 2 sequels. So as soon as I got that, which was in 2021, early 2021, I put everything else into onto the hard drive and just saved. So I've not revisited back to Mercy's world, but at some point, I will, and I will divulge here for the first time on a podcast that high probability she might have a little something to do in breach of trust. So she's definitely gave her a little job to do. To
and
keep her active.
interesting. Yeah, because well, I don't know why, but so the first time I read the Body Man and her character came up, I kept picturing Heidi Klum in my head for some
Oh, interesting.
reason. And then I reread the book and I'm like, "Oh, her description isn't like that at all."
Yeah,
I don't know what I was thinking, but it's interesting how you typecast different characters in your
sure,
head.
absolutely.
Um,
One, and if because you've read The Body Man more recently than I have, but if you recall, or if I recall correctly, she's allowed to leave in The Body Man, where you think with after what she did, what it was, you
yeah,
think she was killed or arrested. She's not. She's let to go, but with one thing: leave and don't ever come back. If I ever see you again, then it's game on. So how does she factor into breach of trust? Well, she's needed.
she
They're
kind
they're,
of
they're her
she cut
specialty is needed for something, is all I'll say.
yeah,
So
she kind of has a I know most authors hate when when you compare their work, but she seems very much like almost a female John Wick type character of sorts.
yeah,
It seems.
that wouldn't be a bad analogy for her. So yeah, she's really good at what she, and what was really cool, which makes me now, I say I'll do these things and I talk about this, and I haven't talked about this in a long time. Now I want to go back to her story, because what I tried to build with her is, why would you have this very attractive, very intelligent woman who kills people for a living? What would be, and there's a lot of ways you can then go, well, this might lead to that might. So I came up with a backstory for her. Now it's a couple years ago, and I think I gave her the perfect reason of why she would go on this murderous rampage at times. And so, yeah, now I want to get out there and get that. I can't move her up on the list because I've already committed to other things, but and that's the cool thing about doing this. So real quick for you and your listeners too, of like, where do I move forward, or what do I do? Because we talked offline about it a little bit.
Yeah.
And, I'm always careful what I'll say online into some of the details, but I haven't abandoned the publishing industry or traditional publishing in any way, shape, or form. I have a couple projects that are in various forms that I will pitch to agents, and hopefully the agent will be able to get a publisher for. So I'd kind of like to do a hybrid approach going forward. So I have a bunch of completed stories and a bunch that can be completed with, a couple months of work. So what I think I'll do is, a couple of the projects I'll go traditional. And then now that I've created this brand, I've got this imprint, I've got the groundwork for it, I can take some of these stories that have been, just languishing on my hard drive, get a professional editor, get them cleaned up, and I can put them out under my own brand. Even if they don't get as many sales as I might have dreamed they would have when I wrote them a couple years ago, I can still give those characters an outlet that they're not just sitting on a hard drive forever. And that's with the caveat that I'm not going to put anything out unless I think it deserves to go out, and I think it could go out by a big publisher. But the way publishing works right now, it's really difficult to get your foot in the door.
Yeah.
And the time, I know some folks that have got publishing deals in the last couple months. Their books don't come out till 2025. So they have a completed book, totally done. Manuscript's done. Publishers approved it. They're going to do edits. But, 2 years from now is when they'll be talking about that story, which is now what I'm doing, talking about The Body Man. 2 years later, I'm talking about The Body Man, but I've also got something else out now as well. So yeah, it's just, there's such a delay with the publishing industry that it makes it really, really challenging.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the other thing too, is like one of the things that I've kind of, run into as well. We kind of talked about this off air, and I have talked about this a little bit on, social media. One of the things in my book, and this is kind of one thing I'm curious about too, is how much do your plots rely on, not really rely, but how much do they integrate real world events, being in the political thriller genre? Because, like, for me, I'll give you an example. One of the things is it's not a major plot point, at least not yet in my series, but there is a female protagonist that I've written that works for the Mossad, and she's Israeli, and at one point she and my main protagonist, they have a history together. And at one point my character is going to go over to Israel and maybe do some stuff. Now, what's interesting about that is I planned that out way before the Israeli-Palestine conflict, at least this most recent one, happened.
Yeah.
And now I'm kind of in the position where we're getting all this new information, and I'm kind of like, well, how do I integrate this, or do I even address what's going on currently in the new story? I'm still writing, but I might need to make a few changes just so it's more reflective now.
Yeah, that's a hard one, Sam, only because unless your book is coming out right when the conflict is taking place, like, right now, unless you've got a book coming out right now, things are going to change in the next couple months. So I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know. I don't think I'd give my advice wouldn't be to make too many changes based on real, because a lot of the authors do, like, the Brad Thors, um, Vince Flynn did it. Kyle Mills took over for him, where they kind of seem like their stories are coming out 6 months before news breaks that has a similar thing going on.
yeah,
I and I think that's a good thing and it's cool. And how you do that is you're very well tuned into the global news, not watching necessarily the U.S.
right.
Um, mainstream media, because and it's not a knock at CNN or Fox or any of them, they're all very selective in what gets
Oh
put out.
yeah, yeah,
You don't have
and
an idea what's going on in this world if you watch CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, CBS Evening News. You have a little bit of a slice of what's happening, sure, but do you have an idea of what's going on globally? No way in God's green earth you have an idea what's going on globally. You get a filtered version of and if you watch most of the newscasts, whether they're skewed conservative or liberal, they all got the same general terms that are being used because their news is all being filtered through a few sources, basically.
yeah, that's and believe me, I don't, that's one of the things that, as a podcaster, this is, this does a lot of, pop culture stuff in society, but
Hmm.
I also do for politics. And one of the things I've tried to do is kind of stay away from, the mainstream US narrative just because everyone, does that. There are kind
Right.
of, a dime a dozen podcasts out there. And then also, as an avid reader of thrillers and whatnot, similar to you, I mean, I hate to say it, I'm not really that shocked that, like, uh, I'm not surprised that Hamas would attack, a concert or anything
No.
like that. There are lots of people who are like, I can't believe they would do this, and I'm like, well, as much as I hate to say it, I'm not at all.
Yeah.
This,
The daycare. Look at the daycare. They try to keep that. It's not got as publicized as it should be. But look what they did to the daycare and the kids. I
yeah,
mean,
it's
beheaded and butchered babies and toddlers, and yeah, and that's one of the things that I don't. I mean, man, there's a lot of stuff coming. You got people protesting in our country, anti-Israel, anti-Palestine, or Hamas, or Palestinians. But tell
yeah,
you what, it's hard not to at least speak the truth when it comes to what's happening over there. And any group that attacks um, daycares, concert goers, that I
yeah,
believe, if I recall, it is a concert for peace.
yeah,
It wasn't a concert for go slay the Palestinians or any other ethnic groups. It was a peaceful concert. So you attack them, that says a lot about your organization. Now,
yeah,
people, of course, then will say, well, there's a moral equivalency. Israel can't attack Palestine or can't invade Palestine, um, because innocent Palestinians will die. And that's a really difficult conversation. And I'm sure it's difficult for people that are, in the IDF, that are in the military, because Hamas will use human shields.
yeah,
So, does that mean you let all the Hamas people live and you just don't do anything? Because if you let all those characters continue on and just back off, what are they going to do in a couple months? They're going to come hit the next concert, or they're going to do that. So, yeah, I'm glad I'm not in the leadership and have to make those decisions, but I don't see that there's a moral equivalency when it comes to um, what the Israelites or what Israel's doing versus what Hamas did to start this particular. And the conflict is nothing new. This is,
right,
anyone that's like, oh my goodness, there's a conflict in Israel and stuff. It's like, have you not paid attention to all the bombings the last 10 years
yeah.
and the
Well,
skirmishes? This is just bigger now because it was such a large incursion, and it was so mass. I mean, I don't even know that they've updated it, but last I heard was like at least 1,500 to 2,000 people, and that's not including all the people that are still missing that
yeah.
were kidnapped.
Well,
So
it's yeah. I mean, it's as a human being, it's it's horrible to watch all of that, and as someone who does commentary, it's horrible to watch all that. I mean, on the flip side, though, as an author, I am looking at this stuff and being like, well, this, as horrible as it is, this would be an interesting avenue to explore maybe in a future story or work it
Mhm.
in some
Well,
in
plus
some
because your fiction is probably in some most fiction obviously is grounded in some form of reality.
yeah.
So that those real world stories that are happening impact what you write in the future.
Yeah,
Sure,
definitely. Well,
absolutely.
and I'm also, I describe my writing style as kind of like this might not be the perfect description, but if I don't know if you've ever played D&D, the tabletop
I know about it, but I've not played it.
game,
No.
but I mean the way you play Dungeons and Dragons, I've only done it once, but there's a lot of writing involved in it
Okay.
because you basically you play through a narrative. There's a you have a you have a guy who kind of sets the stage for your narrative, and then you
Hmm.
kind of role play that
Okay.
scenario out through dice and through rolling dice and whatnot. I
Hmm.
bring that up because I kind of do the same, not exactly, but I kind of do the same thing at least in my writing,
Okay.
where I'm like, how would my president in my fictional universe respond to this based
Hmm.
on what we're seeing. I mean,
Right.
it's really interesting how you can kind of game, you know, how you can kind of come up with different plots in your
Yeah.
universe.
Oh
I
yeah, no.
find.
To me, that's the fun part. I've gotten that question before of how do you come up with the characters? How do you come up with the plot? For me, I come up with a central idea.
Yeah.
So for Ransomed Daughter, my kids were a lot younger when I wrote that first draft, but my thought was, is as a dad, um, uh, and I don't distinguish that son versus a daughter, but
Right.
there's more of a protection dads do for their daughters than I think even their sons. I think
Yeah.
mothers
Yeah.
are very protective of their sons. I think that's just innate in our DNA. And I know gender stuff has gotten a little strange here in the last couple of years, but innately, how history has worked for thousands of years, this is how that worked too. Um, and so, once you have a daughter, lots of things go through your head. But one
Yeah.
of the things when I was thinking of story ideas is what would I do if someone kidnapped my daughter? um, I'd move heaven and earth to get her back, irregardless of laws or anything else, to be honest with you. At
Yeah.
least that would be my thought process. Maybe common sense and morality or whatever else might kick in and draw me back. But, so for this story idea, I thought, well, what if you had a very wealthy father? Money's not the issue, but his child is kidnapped and offered for ransom. What would he do? Well, my first thought is, well, he'd pay it. Absolutely. He doesn't care about the money. He's got upwards to close to $1 billion, 20 million euros, drop in the bucket. Give me my daughter back. What if they don't give her back, though? What if you pay that money and they kill her or they send her back in pieces or whatever? These are butchers, maybe, that have your daughter. So, as a dad, what do? You do whatever you have to do. He just happens to have access to this group that's referred to as the Omega Group through a friend of his that he met through West Point, that he was a roommate with. And he makes that call to say, I need my daughter back. Do whatever it takes. And then it, of course, has to go a little
Right.
cockeyed because it's not exactly what you think's going. It's not exactly what the title says. There is a ransom daughter, but that's not the only thing going on here.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've read it. I did think that was a very interesting premise. Though too
Mm-hmm.
for the book. One of the things that I kind of thought was interesting about the body man is, and I don't know if you had any intention of doing this whatsoever, but it kind of seemed like you were talking up the shadow government or kind of the deep state in air quotes, as it were, in the body man, almost, if I'm not mistaken, before it kind of became a popular term.
Yeah,
Am I
because it's the Body Man kind of fed off of an earlier thing I had written that was so the first it fed from Troy Evans' universe. So real quick, taking a step back, was the first book I wrote in 2014 was called Vengeance, and it was Troy Evans' story, and he was on a path of vengeance. Well, to write that story, instead of writing the next story of what happened after vengeance, why he was on a path of vengeance, which started actually at 9/11. Why he joined the military, what happened that kind of got him in this headspace. And then for the third book I wrote in that series, went back to real time. What did he do after? That's where it kind of went back. So I kind of like did Star Wars out of order because I didn't know what I was doing. But I planned out 7 books, and one of them basically is about a shadow government. I didn't write that one, but I plotted it out. And so it was interesting. And I've told this story on a few other podcasts. When I was pitching Vengeance in New York City at Thriller Fest, one of the agents, I was telling him about the story. And in the course of, the 5 minutes you have, you don't have very long to talk to this person. In the course of that, I said, well, I've got 3 that I'm working on. I think at the time I had already written the first and second. I know Vengeance was done. I think I was writing the third at the time. But whatever it was, I said, well, I'm going to write 7. And this agent was just like, what? You've planned out 7 books? It's like, yeah. And I still remember the comment because it just like blew my mind. And this agent was like, well, how did you have the audacity to think you could write 7 books in this series? And I'm like, how would you not? I had to figure out, and they're not like figure out like full outlines or whatever, but I had to figure out plot ideas of where these characters would go so I could build the world in my head before I wrote even. Some of that was figured out before I wrote the first chapter of Vengeance. Not a lot of it was, but I figured it out as I was writing, how I could tie things together. But yeah, that's where I kind of started thinking the idea of a shadow government. And I'm trying to remember now what the title is for that. Now you're making me feel like I'm old. It wasn't the shadow government, but it was the shadow something. What did I call it? I think it was book 4 or 5. It's one that I did not write, but I kind of sketched out. But yeah, so I've always had that idea in my head of, and I do in real life, I will say this. I don't believe, well, this is kind of a comical thing to say. I don't believe Joe Biden's calling the shots. And that's not a knock at Democrats, Republicans, whatever. But I don't think Donald Trump was calling the shots. I think there's interests and powers there. And I think some whisper a little bit louder than others. And I think some presidents maybe have a little more fortitude that they can kick back. But I mean, if you go back and study Kennedy, that's where I started the Body Man in my narrative. I started the Body Man under Kennedy, which actually will come out in the 3rd Body Man book. But, Kennedy, if you know the history behind him, he was fighting up against, what really probably is the deep state. He had problems with the CIA. He had problems with this government entity and the overreach. And Lee Harvey Oswald killed him for it. What do you know?
I'm very well. I think I don't know if I've made it overtly clear, but like I'm pretty conservative, like I'm like more libertarian with a conservative strain. One of the things that I like about fiction is that writing fiction is I can kind of go off on some of my more. I don't think they're wacky, but some people might think they're wacky, and so it's
maybe
kind
more conspiratorial thought processes.
It's given me more of an opportunity to write some of my, theories about like how the government actually works.
Yeah.
Whereas like if I just were to say, like I do believe that there is a shadow, government or kind of an entity that controls the government, which is kind of what my book Shadows of Deception is. That's kind of where I'm starting this whole thing off, is the fact that there is a shadowy entity, and my main character is an Afghanistan war veteran, and he's struggling now with I came back from Afghanistan, is was what I was fighting for, is that the same thing as what I was told I was fighting?
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
so that's a narrative that I think, is really interesting to explore, especially since I've talked to veterans and they kind of have, the same kind of feeling now that, hey, maybe I wasn't, fighting for what I
Wasn't
thought
fighting
it
for freedom
was.
over there, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm not, and I get out of politics only because my job is to write books and sell books, not to piss off half my listeners or a
Yeah.
third or whatever. But even like Kennedy, I'll follow all of them. I'll follow what Biden says. I'll follow what Trump says. I'll follow what Kennedy, whatever, because I want to be informed, and that helps me for my narratives. It helps me. I can take
Yeah.
some of the worst qualities of these jokers, and I think kind of all of them are jokers sometimes, and I can build my perfect evil president based on just following the news almost. But Kennedy's even mentioned that, he thinks the people that really pull the strings on a lot of politics and on the government are BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. You've got the
Yeah.
three companies that have trillions of dollars of assets under them, and I think the stat is they own 85% of the S&P 500
Yeah.
companies. That's massive influence. And so I'm amazed when people go, "Oh, politicians, they're in it for the good of the people. There might be a little bit corruption." And I'm sure there's some that aren't corrupted. I'm not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. But when you're talking about people that need what was the stat? I can't. I'll get it wrong if I say it, but I want to say how many billions of dollars were poured into the election for 2020 for both parties. I mean, it was like a massive amount of money. Well, when you have to generate that massive amount of money, who do you get it from? You don't get it from Eric Bishop or Sam Whitfield. You might get a couple dollars from us, but that money's coming through special interests. That money is being funneled through stuff. And when if someone were to come in right now and someone were to buy 20,000 of my books, but they said, "Hey, Eric, you need to make a little change to breach of trust, and I want you to put this in there." I might tell them, "Screw you. The story is the story." Or I might go, that's like $100,000. Maybe I should listen to them a little bit.
Yeah.
That might at least enters your thought process. Now, that's from a stupid analogy because I'm just a writer. You take someone's a politician that has to have that money so they can get reelected and has to have that money so they can carry on their lifestyle. When someone owns you or someone's paying for your reelection, and that someone might be 1,000 little someones that all add up to it, but that influence speaks, and that influence has to affect what they do. There's just no way around it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Anyone that
No.
thinks that they're innocent and pure, I've got some beachfront property for you in Kansas. I'd love to sell you.
Yeah. No. And I mean, I didn't mean to get you too far off,
Oh no, it's
into the
okay.
political weeds, but I do.
I love Democrats and Republicans and Libertarians. Buy the book.
Yeah. I mean, I just like I said, going back, to kind of the reason why I'm out. One of the reasons why I write is it does kind of allow me to war game some of this
Sure, absolutely.
stuff in ways that I can't really, do that, in real life. Like I think the whole concept of the body man in and of itself is actually, pretty interesting.
Thank you. I hoped so, and it's going to get more complicated because in breach of trust, what you'll find is that in the body man, it's pretty much referred to as the fact of it's kind of a secretive position. Not many
Yeah.
people know about it, and that's what keeps it going. Well, in breach of trust, because of what happened to the president and because of what happened in Washington, Washington talks. Gossip flows around Washington extremely quickly. So people start to learn that there is a role within the White House referred to as the body man, and that person has a lot of power. That doesn't sit well. And by book 3, it really is not going to sit well because you have an unelected person in the White House that has power over the presidency. That is a scary thing. And I wrote it I wrote it because I thought it was entertaining, but I also end up writing stuff because I want to start conversations with people, not to
Yeah,
stew them
that
and point them the direction I believe, because what I believe is probably far different from what someone else believes. And God bless them, I think they have the right to think that way. I do also have the right to think the way I do. I can respect their opinion, whether I disagree with it or not, and I think we can probably find common ground. But yeah, I want people to read The Body Man or read Breach of Trust and be like, man, do I like that you have someone in the White House that has power over the president? It's thought provoking at the very least.
and see here's me. I'm like, well, that's a really entertaining narrative. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for Eric, I also believe that it might be that it's probably true too that there is a body.
It's funny, I wrote it. So I wrote the first draft. It was completely done in Trump's administration.
Yeah,
So now it was published under Biden. Let me think. When did we publish? Yes. So it
yeah,
published under Biden, but it was totally written under Trump administration. And it was not written it wasn't even written with the current politicians in mind, but it was written as a general rule of how does Washington work? What does absolute power do? What corruption is out there? Because it might not be the case forever, but up until modern times, the presidency for the United States is the biggest world bully pulpit you have. We're the
yeah.
superpower. We have the authority in a way to change other governments, to change the way history is going. Now that might not occur in a few years, who knows? But at least currently, it's still that. So that always has made, and I've always been a student of politics. Although, unfortunately,
Same.
as I've gotten older, I'm in my mid 40s now. I've become a lot more jaded to politics too, because for years, I've just heard empty promises. I'm going to solve this. I'm going to solve that. So I researched what authority does the president actually have? What can the president actually do? And some people probably don't realize how little authority they have, and some people think it's a lot of authority. Depends on how you look at it. But it just helps. It's like you say. For me, then it's cathartic because I can take
Yeah,
ideas I have in my head and I can put them in a story. And as long as I'm not totally dogging one party or one, because I don't ever talk any of my characters when it comes to the office holders. I don't, even if I have someone the Speaker of the House, I don't say the Republican Speaker of the House. And I try to make it vague. I don't want people to go, oh, that's a Nancy Pelosi Speaker of the House, or oh, that's Jim Jordan might be the Speaker in the next couple of days, or he might not be. So, I mean,
right.
goodness knows what any of these,
No, I
goodness
mean,
knows what the Republicans are doing right now. That's for sure.
I
Holy
mean,
crap!
it's always interesting because I have people who automatically assume that you based this character because you like Trump, so therefore this guy is totally your and
Right?
I'm like, okay, you're free to interpret it, but it's not a completely
Yeah.
Donald Trump. I will say I do have a character who's kind of like Elon Musk if Elon Musk were more of like an American.
Okay, that's cool.
So for anyone who reads my books, that is something that I will put out there. And I do think that's an interesting narrative too. Potentially is the effect that Silicon Valley and all these tech companies also play in American
Oh yeah.
society, and potentially with the whole misinformation and the propaganda. So
And I cannot. His name just left my brain, but it's not Zuckerberg, but one of the guys that founded Facebook, one of the original guys. I can't remember which one or what his name was, but
Peter
I do
Thiel,
recall. What's that?
Peter Thiel.
It might be Peter, but I think if he's the one that said he would not let his kids near Facebook, they're not getting on this thing. They're not. I'm not allowing them to do social media, and it's amazing. And I am a huge purveyor of social media, so I'm a hypocrite, you could say.
Yeah.
But the power of it to do, and the way that people can use that to manipulate people's feelings. And I mean, I'll know it for myself. If I go to my Facebook, thing, post, which I don't look Facebook hardly at all anymore, but when I did use it a lot more, especially around the elections, man, you'd see a certain spin on it depending on based on whether you were conservative or you were liberal. You would get those stories push you, whether you were Christian or non-denominational or Catholic or Muslim, whatever you're, Baptist, whatever you might be. Yeah, it's. I mean, AI is another thing, and I'm not versed in it very well. A friend actually took my bio recently from the book, and he ran it through AI and said, "Hey, update your bio. Check this out." And I got like one line into it, and I was just texting him back, and I said, "Dude, AI, right?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "It sounds like AI." But I tell you what, it definitely put some bells and whistles on boring Eric Bishop's life of what he really does in real life.
What? Well, so here's something, and I'm not revealing anything new because I actually talked about this in the in the in the intro of my book. But I mean, one of the things is I've taken all of my rough drafts, like actual chapters I've written, and put
Mm-hmm.
them through ChatGPT. It's not
Gotcha.
plagiarism
Yeah,
because
I got you.
it's still your original, but
Right.
I have to say that a lot of the drafts that you know I've initially wrote, they came out like a lot more polished
Mm-hmm.
in ChatGPT. So I mean, I still did a lot of editing, but I will say that like using ChatGPT did cut down like my actual writing time at least 25%, I would say. So
Okay.
it is helpful. I will say that you can't really rely on it
Yeah.
because it's still like it still is a computer. It will still make
Sure.
errors, and I think a lot of writers, like I know that George R. R. Martin is really concerned about like AI taking over for writers, and he's a lot older, so I don't know if he fully understands the technology, but it's definitely it's a helpful tool,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think it's going to be anything that takes over for actual writers anytime soon because
Well, I'm a little older than you, Sam, and I saw Terminator 2 in the theater when it came out. So I think we're screwed.
yeah.
If I can sell a bunch of books, I'm buying an island near Bali, out in Indonesia. There's about 30, I think, it's either 18 or 32,000 islands out in Indonesia. I'm gonna buy my own, and then I'm just gonna watch the world burn in hell
I'm
because I don't know. I'm a little bit more on the skeptical side of we're starting to go some interesting directions with some of this technology. So
I'm not necessarily worried about Chat GPT, which is just like a that's just like a chat bot, right?
no. I
It
know, I know.
But I will say I am more worried about like this whole thing of like the metaverse and everyone having like a digital AI, and it does seem a bit Blade Runner esque
Well,
too.
and again, I walk a fine line with what I talk about on these sometimes because I don't want to piss people off. But we started to see a little bit of that during COVID stuff here in the United States, where
Yeah.
you started to have a digital pass needed. Okay, you have to prove your, and I saw it firsthand. Just a quick story was I was in New Orleans. I was supposed to go down there for a BoucherCon, a writers conference, and that was 2021. It got canceled about a month before. Um, I had prepaid everything. I had prepaid hotel, airfare, and I could have kind of pushed the button and got that at least credits back or whatever. But I had planned to write part of, and I have chapters for Breach of
Yeah.
Trust that are set in New Orleans, and I was like, man, I still want to go. I changed custody time around. I didn't have my kids. I ended up meeting down there Jack Stewart, who at the time was reservist Navy pilot. He's since got out. His book comes out next month. Actually, his debut book. He actually met me down there, and long story short on that was he said, do you want to fly? Because I tried to get a backseat ride. He flew F-18 Hornets. And I'm like, hey, backseat. And he just, laughed at me and said, never going to happen. So, oh, well. He goes, but I can get you an F-18 Hornet simulator. Same thing we train on at base if you want to go down to the base. And I'm like, absolutely. So he picked me up at the airport. We went down to Joint Base New Orleans. He got me in the simulator for like an hour and a half. And I had an amazing time. But like a week before I went to New Orleans, they were requiring proof of vaccination to go in any restaurants.
Yeah.
They would not let you in a restaurant or bar. What was interesting is you could go in stores and shop. So you'd come to the storefront and you'd have, gumbo. You'd have some New Orleans food here. You can't walk in there unless you show proof of vaccination. But you can walk in next door to the souvenir shop. You'd have to put a mask on, so they were requiring masks. But you could walk in the souvenir shop, and you didn't have to have proof of vaccination. And you could be in there for an hour. It wasn't like staying here for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So it was just really, it was just weird. But it was just one of those like really, this is the United States where you have to have like proof of something to walk in to eat food, because if you're not vaccinated, how are you going to eat? Well, certain places will still get you takeout, or you can get window service, or Cafe Du Monde. You could still go into Cafe Du Monde and get food, or get beignets and stuff. But yeah, it was just that was an interesting time in human history. I don't know if that's the last time we're going to have that go on either, but it was very interesting to live through. Which threw some of the fiction right out of the window, because it's like, if I had thrown some of these story ideas at an agent or at a publisher 5-6 years ago, they would have been like, this is the stupidest made up crap you could ever. That'll never happen. Now I don't know how to make some stuff up, because it's like, geez, where do we go next?
Well, that's
where do we go?
Well, that's exactly why I don't. One of my friends is like, well, Sam, you're big into science fiction, so why don't you write a science fiction book? And I've literally said, at this point, things are so weird that if I were to write a science fiction book, how long would it be before it actually became a reality?
3 weeks, 4 weeks, 35.
At this point, maybe like, if someone had said that a global pandemic would affect, us in 2020, I don't think anyone. I wouldn't have believed it 5 years ago. I would have thought, "Oh, you're high," or something like that.
So, quick story on that was my son was in Scouts before 2020, but early 2020, we were at a Scouts meeting, and one of the dads came in and he said, hey, there's some weird stuff coming out of China. And we're like, what do you mean? And he kind of foreshadowed what ended up happening like a month and a half, 6 weeks later or so. And we're all just like, dude, you're full of crap. That's not, whatever. That's too many conspiratorial websites. Stop watching all the stuff. Stop watching InfoWars and all this other stuff. You're going down a path that's not true. Yeah, 6 weeks later, we were eating crow, and I was one of the people at Walmart, at least around here, and I lived in the South. So the South being Carolina.
I'm in Florida.
You're in Florida.
So, yeah.
So South Carolina, Florida probably was similar to South and North Carolina, but our experience was far different from like my family in Connecticut. I have a lot of coworkers in California. I go out there for work a lot. Their experience was much different, but they did a stay-at-home order here on a Friday night. I would just was I separated? I was definitely separated at the time. I don't think I was divorced yet, but I was living. I was alone half the time, and I was with a friend then that Saturday up at his house, and because I went out right before, like the night before the stay-at-home order came out. I had a friend who was overseas that called me, and I was like, hey, what's up? And he's like, and by that point, COVID was being talked about, and there was talk about some lockdowns, but it was all kind of like, hey, this might happen, but we don't know what's going to happen in around here.
Right.
And so this friend from overseas calls and says, hey, I know you got kids, and I know what kind of dad you are. What kind of food supply do you have? And I'm like, I don't know. I got pantry with some food. He goes, how much food do you have? And I'm like, I'm sure several days or more than that, but I don't have like a massive thing. He goes, why don't you go out and do some shopping tonight? And I was like, what's going to happen? He goes, go shop. I don't know. It might be nothing, or it might be, what's going to hit the fan within 48
Yeah.
hours. I went out that night and I think I dropped $500. Boom, canned goods, rice, fuel for my camping stove, rations, water, boom, 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 boom. Loaded up the car, and people are looking at me
Yeah.
like I'm weird. Well, then the next night or 2 nights later, I can't remember what the time frame was now, is when North Carolina, because I had my house, where my rental house was in South Carolina, my office was in North Carolina, so I went across the border every day back and forth. Well, North Carolina issued a stay-at-home order. And so I'm like, well, what's that mean? Well, you can travel for essential travel, you can travel for work, but besides that, for 2 weeks, you weren't supposed to go anywhere. So I drove up to a friend's house that night, and I was telling him how I just loaded up. And he goes, and him and his wife were like, I don't know that we have enough stuff. So we drove up to Hendersonville, North Carolina to a Walmart. I had a gun on me, and I had a concealed permit, so I was allowed to have a gun on me and stuff. That's the only time Walmarts can be scary. Not judging Walmart, but Walmart can be a scary place at times. But that's the only time I was in Walmart that literally there was people pushing buggies down the aisle, putting their arms out and just pouring canned goods, not even looking at what they were pouring into Kings. And like toilet paper everything was getting cleared out. And we were there for about 30 minutes. And I bought another $150 of crap that I probably ended up donating to a food bank 6 months later. But it was just, it was the first time in my life that I'd ever felt like panic set in. Like, is it all going to come crashing down? It was such a weird dystopian, otherworld feeling going on. I think people have kind of forgot it somewhat, but man, I still remember what those nights were like. And I'm like, I keep I have, multiple packs of water in the crawl space now, and I keep the canned goods. And just because it's like, okay, I've been through that now. I'll be good for a month easy, maybe more at all times. Cause it's like, I don't want to be having to run out to the grocery store, and load up and have that fun experience at Walmart getting, getting my cart stolen.
Yeah, no, that was weird. And then, like, the other thing that was really weird for me too was once the vaccine came out, I don't know what your take on the vaccine. My take on it is, I mean, if you want the vaccine, great, more power to you. If you don't, you shouldn't be mandated to
I think
take
if the
it.
government tells you should take something, you should absolutely take it without question, Sam.
Yeah.
No, no,
My
I believe in personal choice for any of that stuff. Your body, your choice. And
yeah.
that applies to vaccines, in my opinion.
That was my whole take on it. The thing that was really weird to me too, though, was like there were all these companies like Dunkin' Donuts was like, or I think it was Krispy Kreme, or maybe both of them were like offering free donuts, or
free donut if you got a vaccine shot. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, they were.
or free McDonald's. And so I'm looking at all these companies basically doing giveaways, and I'm like, well, they've said that like if you eat fast food or something, like you're high at risk to get COVID. So why,
Right.
like,
Diabetes is like the biggest. Obesity is like the biggest trigger.
yeah?
That
So
Happy
what?
Meal that'll help you.
So why are all these companies like giving away, basically giving away stuff when their products are basically like elevating your risk for COVID? It just seems so
Yeah.
backwards. Like,
Yeah, it was just very weird time, and I know people on both sides of the spectrum that were vaccinated. I know people that were not vaccinated, and yeah, it was bizarre, and I hate to think that's not like the one time in my life, because that was the first time in my life I had gone through anything like that. My gut feeling is that's not the only time I'll have to go through something like that, though. Maybe that's it. Maybe we got it out of our system, but
I knew people who were at each other's throats. Like
oh,
if you were unvaccinated, you were an idiot for
yeah,
and then if you and then if you were vaccinated, well, you were just, again. And I was like, I'm staying out. I'm staying out of this.
Yeah.
So,
I know people that
yeah,
couldn't go to family members' house because they weren't vaccinated.
yeah,
100% I know people extremely close to me that they could
yeah,
not go to a family member's house because they were not vaccinated. And they did not see those family members for a long time
yeah. I know.
because of that.
I know
Yeah.
people who sadly were disowned by certain family members because
Yeah.
they were unvaccinated. And I'm like, this is, and here I am being like, this is what the powers that be want. They want us to be divided. So,
Yeah, and put it back to the politics. I hate to go that direction with it, but yeah, I think the two major parties in our country aren't showing any form of unity, and I tend to side with the voices that say, you know what, folks, there's a lot of difference, and people are allowed to believe whatever it is they believe, whether it's religion or sexuality or whatever.
yeah,
It's not anyone else's opinion or voice to put you down for that. But I think we have more in common than we're led to believe.
yeah,
And I think if we can find that common ground, yeah, maybe some issues we just will say, hey, we're going to choose to agree to disagree. But, be nice to each other, be kind to each other, love each other. Um, don't be an asshole. I had that actually. That's what years ago someone asked me, like, what would you want your gravestone to be? And I thought about it for a minute, and that was what I said. I'd like it to say he wasn't an asshole. I think if I get through life and I'm not that, then I probably did a halfway decent job.
I
And there might be some people out there that say I am one, but I think there's quite a lot of people that would say I'm not, because I sure try not to be. Don't ask my ex, but
I don't. Yeah. No, I don't think, and I think that's a good thing to strive. I also don't think you can go through life trying to placate and be nice to everyone. I don't think that's a good
no.
way to live either.
No, I think you have to be yourself. You just have to be respectful,
Yeah, and
but not
yeah,
be steamrolled over either. Not be a doormat. So you have to stand up for what you believe. Just do it in a respectful manner.
and that's, to kind of go back to the whole, writing thing. Like I know someone who read my book, and they actually said, well, the subject matter made me feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to say. Either you shouldn't read my book, or maybe my book is, bringing up a subject that maybe you might want to, dive into further. Why is it making you feel?
Right.
I don't think it, my book's not that deep, but even
Mm-hmm.
so, it still asks questions, even in
Yeah.
a fictional narrative. And I think good writing can do that too. There have been several times, even in your book, where, again, I thought back to, is there really, you know, is there really a body man? It certainly would explain a whole lot.
Is there a body man? That's the most common question I've got in the last 2 years, and I
That
always stick to the same answer.
that
Maybe.
and also I should be that
Maybe.
and also I should be dubiously aware, and maybe I should be a little more cautious about extremely good-looking European women too. So, but
They might get you in the end. You never know.
yeah. So,
Um, oh shoot, it's not a yeah. So I was about to say it's in the Body Man, but no, it's in Mercy's story that has not been completed yet. There's a scene that takes place. It'll probably stay in the final version, but I can't give away too much with it. But let's just say she ends up having to use a wine bottle in a very creative way to take someone out, and that
she
was a
had
fun chapter to write. So
she
or fun
actually,
scene to write.
if I'm not mistaken, you made a reference to that uh in the Body Man at one
Okay,
point.
so I might have made a reference to it, and then I might have expanded upon it then in her story, where they actually tell the full story of what happened with
It
that whole thing.
it's
Maybe that's what it was. Again, I haven't read The Body Man in a couple of years, so too many other stories have happened since then. I'm showing my age.
It's her equivalent of the John Wick pencil story. Then I
Very
guess.
much so. Very
So
much so. Yes. So just fun.
um,
Again, it's fun to write, and that's the one thing,
yeah,
bring it back to the writing is I try to encourage people, man, if you got stories in your head and you think you have the desire to write something, do it. You might be the only one that ever reads it, or maybe a couple of friends will read it, and it might not be very good, but guess
yeah,
what, you can still get something out of your head. And for me, I had someone message me the other day. They were talking about, well, yeah, I've started writing something, and how did you do it? And I said, well, it wasn't easy. To say, oh, it's real easy, you're full of it. So for me, at the time when I first started writing the first novel, especially, my kids were a lot younger. I didn't let it interfere with family time. So I wrote at night when everyone went to sleep.
yeah.
And to do that, what did I have to give up? Two things: sleep, to some degree, and television. So I had to give up two things. Sleep wasn't a good thing to give up, and I got myself physically sick after about 3 months of not sleeping enough. So don't do that. But television was a good thing to give up so that I could get that first story out. Even though it never got published, even though it never saw the light of day, that sense of accomplishment was invaluable. And that built the foundation that 4 books are on the fourth book. So 3 more books later, the fourth book is when The Body Man was created.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have happened without that first story coming out and me putting my butt on the chair and writing it pretty much 6 nights a week for months until I had a first draft done.
Well, you know, you can put this on, the blurb for your next book, but I can tell you that the weekend that I got Ransomed Daughter, that pretty much replaced my television,
Good.
for the weekend. So
Gave
yeah,
you
I
some
mean,
visual. Some your television was in your eyes. You got to read. You get to put you, and hopefully it puts you in there.
yeah,
I read through it about 3 weekends ago. It's probably the last time I'll ever read it again. Honestly, I read it one last time after all the edits. After I think I had fixed everything, I read it one last time just for enjoyment. And I was going to publish it. So if I read it through again, I'd read it enough that I liked it, but I wanted to read it from a fan perspective of, do I like this story? And I tell you what, I read through it, I put it down, and I just told myself, you did it. You did it.
yeah,
You did what you put out, what you set out to accomplish. This is a good story. People are going to like the story. Some people won't like it. I'll get negative reviews, or I'll go people that'll say this isn't believable, or your interrogation scene is crap. Pro tip: I'm not former military intelligence. I've never interrogated anyone. I've seen a lot of movies. I took some liberties. Was it fun? Did you like Harvey the
yeah.
White Rabbit's there? Do you like the dialogue? Because I did my best. If you don't like it, that's cool. Thanks for buying the book.
That
Don't
that's
buy another one. That's okay.
that was one of my things too. Is I got someone who was like, "This isn't Meryl Tilly accurate. This guy, played way too much Call of Duty." That was one
Right.
of the, and it's like, well, I mean, you're not wrong. I do love some Call of Duty on occasion, but also, I mean, I
Right.
do have, I actually do have, friends who, you and I both probably do have friends who, served in the military, and
Yeah.
I've asked some of them, is this realistic? Some of them will say yes, some of them will say no, but I did have one who would be like, I wouldn't want to read what we actually did in the field because it's too boring.
Right.
It doesn't make for a good narrative. So,
Yeah.
you
When
know,
you're a door kicker, you're not kicking down doors 24 hours a day normally. So and I, if you really, and I have some friends that
yeah,
have actually, I'm going to a wedding in 2 weekends from now for someone that's active duty, and one of my friends that will be there as well is retired. He was fifth group. So I've heard tons of stories from these guys over the years, and for every guy that's in there kicking down a door, you got 3 or 4 logistics people that are getting them the supplies and the food and doing everything it takes to put a soldier out there on the front line.
yeah,
So for a lot of those people that have served and served for 20 years, they never pick up a rifle. They never fire a gun. They don't ever do any of that. But that role is important. If you didn't have that role, you wouldn't have the person that's kicking in the door,
Right.
going to kill Osama bin Laden or whatever guys on the list this time to get. So
Yeah. And even the guys who do see combat, I mean, it's very, at least from what they've told me, it's all very, quick, instantaneous. It's not like the movies of Hollywood where there are drawn out firefights, or anything
probably
like
rarely,
like
yes. Well,
that.
this is really the first. I know Carr's talked about it in some of his interviews. This is the first time after the War on Terror, after 9/11 happened. It's kind of the first time in modern history that you could join the military and literally be in active duty and be deployed for a 20-year career and have multiple engagements.
Yeah.
Because prior to 9/11, you could serve 20 years in the military and never pick up a rifle and be an
Yeah.
infantryman, but never have a reason to. If you didn't get deployed for Gulf War, Korea and all that was long before you. So, I guess you had Grenada, you had a few other things. But yeah, this has kind of been, and because of that, I've gotten to know some of these people that served for those time, and it's been really interesting and scary in a way to see these soldiers that have come out after all these deployments and just the changes that have taken place and the things they've seen. And it also points back to where we've failed in a way of not for, especially the first several years after the war had begun, we weren't giving those soldiers the treatment they needed for when they returned back to regular life.
Yeah.
And then VA let a lot of soldiers down, and the burn pits, and just just like cascades of all the problems that started.
Yeah, I mean that's another narrative that I've covered a little bit, kind of in a side plot, of veterans coming back from war and dealing with PTSD. And I mean, I thank God I haven't experienced any of that myself, but I have. I know people who have, and I've tried to write some of those characters
Mm-hmm.
in a way that would reflect that. And one of the compliments that I got was, one of my buddies who's a veteran actually said, "Wow, you actually did a really good job of accurately portraying someone who goes through PTSD," and
Good.
that, in a respectful way, and that meant the whole world to me. I could care less about the one guy who's like, this isn't militarily accurate. So
Right.
if I can capture, the heart of, someone in a character, I feel like I've done my job as an author.
No, that is.
So.
It's a general rule, and I try to tell some advice I got years ago from a very well-respected authors. Because I asked them, I said, what should I be prepared for? And they said two things: don't look at your reviews and don't look at your numbers. Those two things as an author are just going to mess with your head.
Yeah.
For the most part, I didn't, especially originally. I've looked with Ransomed Daughter to see if I'm getting reviews. I think might have 12 on Amazon as of the first 6 days or so. But I've not dug in to see what the reviews say or any of that. And I haven't looked at the sales numbers and
neither have I. I mean, the only reason I know about the guy who complained about, the COD thing is just because it was so laughable that I actually kind of got a chuckle out of it. That someone was that mad that oh, he's not a super spec op guy.
Right.
No, I was a 20-something-year-old college kid when I started writing this story. So
they have the right to leave their opinion out there. The good news is they bought as long as they did. If they bought your book, hey, they bought the copy. They didn't like it, then you still got to sale out of it. So, and I do leave reviews, even if on the rare occasion I read a book and it's just horrible. I'm never going to put that in a review. What a horrible book. I find something positive. Honestly, I've gotten so busy and everything now where if I don't get through the first chapter, maybe sometimes 2 chapters, and I'm not engaged, I'll just skim, and I'll maybe like catch the middle and catch the last chapter or two, and just, hey, good job.
Well,
Good job. You,
that's
you finished a book. Congratulations, and keep it very above the board. Give them their rating, and just. But I used to read everything years, 10, 15 years ago. If I didn't like a book, first page, I would still read it because I either bought it or I got it from the library, and I felt like I had to read it. Now I have no problem spending 10 minutes going, well, I'm done, and
well
just
that
being done because I have 50 more books probably on a shelf that one day I might get to read, and that grows every day or every week or month.
yeah, that's one of the reasons too why I wrote in the novella format too is I was like, well, I don't have a lot of time to I don't want to read these big long lengthy novels as a reader,
Yeah,
right? So why would I want my audience to suffer through a big long novel if I'm not willing
right.
to do the same too?
Precisely. Yeah.
Now I mean there are a few authors where that is the exception. Jack Carr is, one of them, but like one author who I like is Robert Ludlum, who wrote the Bourne books. But my
Yeah, I got them. I got them down here. All
but
the originals.
but one of my big criticisms of Robert Ludlum, not so much with the Bourne series, but with some of the other ones, is some of them just drag on for a long. And one of them I actually did write
Hmm.
like a negative review, being like, I like the story, but it just took so long
Yeah.
to get there that I lost interest. And by the end, the payoff wasn't really that great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I've definitely my tastes have changed with just with putting the novella out. Even like Breach of Trust, I was supposed to start it back this weekend, and I did not. So maybe the next couple nights I might dive in. Probably won't get to it tonight. But I forget what my word count is. Last I looked, I know it's hovering in the 100,000 range, maybe right at or right around there. But I'm gonna dice it down because my own attention span is less, and I think I know there's plenty of readers that will go out and read a 500-600 page book, but I'd rather give less is more philosophy of cut them down a little bit and have
yeah,
that's one thing I did like with Ransomed Daughter was, and it's the feedback I've gotten from readers, even just last couple of days, people that have already read through it that bought it on Amazon, is that it was a fully thought out plot, but just really quick read. It just bounced, boom, boom,
yeah,
boom, boom. Or it hit every chapter. Every chapter just hit. It didn't have a lot of, and it didn't have a lot of the background that I'd want to give the characters. And that's what the next one will do. The next one will dive a little bit more into, like Jesus's background in East LA. We'll dive into that a little bit more with the next story. Why the Jackal is such a jackass. We'll dive a little bit more into the Jackal's background and stuff, and but
yeah,
not go crazy with it because again, I don't want to have a big, massive book. It'll be a full length novel that comes out end of next year, but
yeah,
it won't be as big as the Body Man was. I'll slim it down a little bit.
for sure. Yeah, and I also think like it. If I explain, at least for me, like if I explain my character's entire backstory, in the first book, what is there going to be for future,
Right, you've taken the mystery out of their character to some degree. Yeah,
you know? So,
absolutely. Cool.
anyway, though, we've been at this for
Yeah, a little
about
bit. I don't know if
two.
anyone's going to want to watch 2 hours of this, but I had a good conversation with you, Sam.
I do know people who, I know people who will watch like 4 hour Joe Rogan podcasts.
I don't. A lot of times I'll skip out if they're the super long ones. But if it's someone I want to
uh,
see, then I'll sometimes
yeah.
go through the super long ones. Yes.
I will say that as far as long books go, I'm almost at the end of Elon Musk's biography, that Walter Isaacson.
Okay. Interesting.
I actually finished your book right before I dove into the Elon Musk bio, and I mean, it definitely. I mean, I, some of the criticism against Musk is definitely warranted, but I will
Hmm.
definitely say that, if you thought you knew about, all about him, uh you, chances are you probably didn't, because his story is a lot more, complex than a
Yeah,
lot of
I'm sure.
people think. And I mean, Walter Isaacson did a pretty good job of, you know, basically, you know, compiling this guy's life into, uh, an 800-page book or so. So,
Gotcha.
um,
A breach
yeah,
of trust will not be 800 pages. We're gonna try to get it. We're trying to keep it under 400. Will be my plan. So I'm gonna
I
try to
uh, I I
tighten it up.
pre- I appreciate that. So,
Yes, I hey,
but
well now that I'm putting out my own too, you know, the print cost is, I've kind of learned the print costs. Well, the print cost is much more expensive on a 450 page book than a 360 page book, which probably means your profit margin is going to be a lot smaller on a 450 page book unless you jack your price up. So,
yeah, well,
um,
I don't, with Amazon, at least I don't know how you do it, but I mean, I publish through KDP, so, for my, I don't have to pay anything to print, but
oh no no no, yes, correct.
it just comes out. But yeah, it's like, yeah, the bigger the book is, the less profit you get, just because they have to spend more money to print, and so,
Yep.
you
And
know,
that print cost is your cut. So if Amazon, and that's all common knowledge. If you've put a book out there, Amazon will give you 60%, they'll keep 40%. You go, oh, cool. However, your 60% is going to be lessened by the print cost of that book.
yeah,
So your oh, cool goes down quickly if you have, and again, your price point changes. So the novella is priced significantly cheaper than what the publisher put the Body
yeah,
Man out. Well, it's
I
also a much smaller book, so the print fee for the novella was a lot cheaper than because it's a not quite a third, but less than half for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, my uncle my uncle was one of the ones who bought the book, and I sold mine on Amazon for like for not for $10, and it was like, you need to raise the price on that one. I'm like, well, it's it's just a novella that, and
Hmm.
it's not, that much. And besides, I'll make $7 off of that on print. So,
Yeah,
it's still pretty good. The pricing margin is definitely interesting.
yeah. It's
So,
a lot. It's again, it's one of those things you have to learn that I didn't intend to have to learn that, but and also your profit margin and everything's different. Amazon versus Ingram Spark, which will get your book to everything else like Barnes and Noble and libraries and small bookstores and all that. But the payout is different, and the print costs are different, and
yeah,
costs for printing. And the
I'm
quality is really good. I was surprised. I ended up doing a hardcover, which I wasn't. I did one just as kind of see what it would look like because I knew it wouldn't have a dust jacket since it was Amazon. But because it's a novella and it's thinner, it actually does. A dust jacket would have been a bad idea with it. And the hardback, I love. I love how it turned out.
my see mine isn't wasn't big enough to do it. Like, I couldn't justify a hardcover, but
Yeah, it has to be a certain thing. Yes.
one of the things that my friend did suggest is, he's like, well, once you get the first, like, um so I'm kind of doing my uh book of series in like seasons, so to speak.
Okay.
So the first three books will be like season one, so to speak, or
Sure.
or the second book will be like, and so once I get the seasons and I can compile them together, then I'll do the
Yeah,
hard.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how those will go too.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
but this is interesting, interviewing you and then also talking shop. So,
Yeah, it's
as
always good.
well.
Always
So
enjoy talking shop. So I've learned a lot, and I'm glad to share what I've learned with fellow authors and the general public for sure, the readers out there. So
I appreciate it.
yeah, thank you.
Once again, where can people find you? Do you have a website?
I do. My website is my name. It's got my middle initial in there, Eric P, which stands for Paul, but ericpbishop.com. That will send you everywhere. Bookwise, the simplest way to go is go to Amazon and type in Ransomed Daughter, and it'll be the first thing that pops up, and it's an ebook, paperback, and hardcover.
The cover is, whoever did your cover they did a really good job on it.
Todd Wilkins. Todd, I gave Todd his props. He's in the acknowledgments and everything as well. Todd Wilkins did the cover design, and he knocked that image out of the park. So I was very pleased with how the cover turned out. I think it looks just as good as any cover out there that Atria or any of the big boys are putting out. So I think Todd's got a good eye. So yeah, thank you.
All right, well, Eric P. Bishop, Ransomed Daughter, and the Body Man too. If you haven't read the Body Man, go and read that one too, because with everything going on in the world, well, that might not be fiction. So much. I'm not sure. So
I'm not talking about who my contacts are in the Biden-Harris administration. So
yeah.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate your time. Good chat.
I appreciate it as well. And
take care. Have a good night.
All right, you too.
Thanks for listening to The Whitfield Report on the NGC Network. Please visit Sam's website at www.thesamwhitfield.com and support Sam on Patreon at patreon.com/Whitfield Report. Until next time, God bless, God save this great nation, and God, freedom, legacy, in that order.